It's time for CIBL Biz Tips, bringing you actionable strategies to grow and improve your business. Prepare to become civilized.
What's up, Central Illinois? Welcome to CIBL Biz Tips, where we bring you concepts and strategies to grow your Central Illinois business. Today, we are joined again in the Zoom recording studio by Cari Rincker, owner of Rincker Law in Shelbyville, Champaign, and New York City. Last time, in the last session, you heard what is an LLC. You learned about what it does, why you might want to consider it. And at the end of the session, we kind of talked a little bit about maybe applying for an FEIN number and kind of the start of the application process, I guess you would say. So, Cari, step number 2, as a business owner has decided that it's time for them to set up an LLC. What's the application process and what's the next step look like?
Yeah, it's not required that you work with an attorney. I just want to be very clear about that. But I would encourage folks to work with an attorney at this stage in the game. I just think sometimes as an entrepreneur, it's easy to be a penny wise and a pound foolish, and this might not be that time to do it without an attorney. But you can go to the Secretary of State's website. There is an ability to file online, and you're going to want to make sure that you choose limited liability company. In Illinois, it's going to ask you, are you forming a standard LLC, which is a regular old LLC, or a series LLC, which is what I had referred to. The series LLC is more expensive. It's about a $750 filing fee. So, if that's not what you're wanting to choose, then stay away from that. And it's a very simple application process. I always like to do the expedited filing fee because I get it back within 24 or 48 hours. So kudos to the Secretary of State's office in Illinois for, at least if you pay a little extra, a very quick turnaround on forming that limited liability company. You're going to want to first, before you file, do a search on the name just to make sure that you're all clear there. And if you really want to err on the side of caution, I would actually also do a search for your business name on the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office website as well, just to make sure that there's not somebody in Oklahoma working out of their garage with the same business name that happened to have a federal trademark, okay? Because that might cause you some concern after you form the entity.
Awesome. Right. So let's say that they do work with Rincker Law or a different attorney. How should they start that process? I guess contact you, of course, initially, but what's that process look like to start with?
So when folks come to me, for example, sometimes, but not always, we're having a little bit of a conversation just to make sure that they're picking the right business entity for them. I have very little hesitation when it comes to limited liability companies because they are so practical and flexible, but there might be initially just a little bit of conversation there. LLCs can be manager managed or member managed. So there might be some conversations like that with the attorney, but the attorney would then file the articles of organization with the Secretary of State. With a corporation, it's the articles of incorporation. So same thing, but different business structure. Step 2 is basically then to try to get the federal employer identification number. The client doesn't need to work with me. They can do it on their own at the IRS website if they want, or work with their banker or work with their accountant. My feelings don't get hurt if people want to do it on their own or with somebody else. But that's sort of step 2. And that's going to be required to get a bank account. Okay. And so you're going to want to do that at some point. And then step 3 would be working on the operating agreement. This is an internal document that is not public record. It does not get filed with the Secretary of State's office, but it's basically the ins and outs of how you're going to run your business. It's not so important if you're the only owner, right? But it can be really important if you have more than one business owner, okay? And, in a sense, it's a little bit like a business prenup. Right? You're laying out all the rules of the road and what would happen if somebody dies, if somebody, is disabled, somebody wants out, right? And so it's going to lay all those things, set forth those things. It can be amended at any time.
Perfect.
Wow. I think I've already decided I'm working with someone. I'm not doing, I wouldn't do this on my own. I don't know about you, Derek. I don't know what your feelings are, but
Yep, for sure. That's if you don't have any legal background, you might be able to figure out how to get the FEIN number,
exactly.
online. But setting up all these agreements, I would heavily rely on a professional to do that.
Absolutely.
So now when you are applying for the LLC, do you have to specify what your business services are or products are when you're applying for that LLC?
No, you could just state it's for any legal purpose. And in fact, this is sometimes one of the mistakes that I see from entrepreneurs when they do it on their own. It's that they want to have something very specific purpose and, they're catering to this client and, nobody needs to know that. It's for any legal purpose. And, your marketing and branding will tell the world what you are all about. You don't need to tell a Secretary of State, and you certainly don't need to narrow what you are doing.
Sure.
Great.
So let's say that a business owner has applied for an LLC. I know a lot of small business owners, let's say they're doing online sales. And they've applied, and it's XYZ Online Sales Company LLC. But they develop a product of their own, and now they start manufacturing a different product. Instead of selling, let's say they're drop shipping online, it's not their product. Now they're manufacturing their own. Should they, should they apply for a second LLC? And we might be getting too far into the weeds there. Or is there a way they can include that in their current LLC and maybe do a DBA, something like that?
Yeah, I mentioned in the first podcast about farms and having the operating entity, having one LLC and the land being separate. So if you have a portion of the entity that is of higher liability risk, right, you might want to shelter that out in some way. For example, like a restaurant is higher liability risk, right? So you're going to want to kind of carve something like that out. So I have certainly had clients that, when they're doing online sales and they have a manufacturing arm, that they have a separate entity there. As a caveat though, you are adding more administrative overhead to your life. Okay. There's now 2 sets of business entities that you need to do annual meeting minutes for. And to maintain that, it doesn't do anybody any good for you to have multiple business entities if you are not maintaining the corporate formalities, if you are not keeping funds separate, and you are not operating with them like on an arm's length transaction. So there should be contracts between those 2 LLCs for the manufacturing part of it. Okay. And that's one of the things that the court would look at in you sort of just adhering to the separate entity as truly being separate.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Wow.
So for the best advice, reach out to your attorney.
Exactly.
I think it's prudent. Yes.
Yes. So, on an average LLC application, what's the typical time frame from start to finish once you apply, to get your FEIN number, everything run through the state? What's a typical time frame that you see?
Yeah, I think on the fast end, you're looking at a few weeks and maybe a month on the long end. And things can be more protracted if there's a lot of different business owners, and so perhaps that operating agreement stage can take some time. And so it's the same thing that I tell my clients with an actual prenup. It's the same thing with the business prenup, that if the more that people can be on the same page, the better, to help that process go a little bit more smoothly.
Perfect.
Great.
Was there anything else that you would like to add on the application process, Cari?
No, I think that you pretty much covered that. I wanted to note too that, at least I help clients get their federal employer identification number, but they will also need a state employer identification number if they are going to have employees in payroll.
Yeah.
Great.
Awesome. So I guess that is one more question. Let's say they're headquartered here in Illinois, but they also have an operation in Indiana, let's say. What state should they apply in, and do they need 2 different ID numbers, or how does that work?
So I'm actually a New York limited liability company. I'm a specific kind of a limited liability company that's in New York called a professional limited liability company. Illinois doesn't even recognize that type of business entity.
Really?
So it's interesting from state to state.
Uh-huh.
So I am actually a registered foreign corporation in Illinois.
Wow.
So in your example, you could form it in either state, but you would need to be registered as a foreign corporation in the other state. You'd have a requirement, and the threshold for this does vary from state to state. So this is a little oversimplistic, but if you are regularly and continually doing business in another state, you should be registered as a business entity in that state as a foreign corporation. So if you have 2 offices, right, you are regularly and continually doing business. You've obviously reached that threshold, and arguably you're reaching that threshold too if you have employees and you're constantly seeking business in that particular state. And so which state to form in? I can tell you that Illinois has sort of an expensive annual of filing fee, so in comparison to other states. So you're going to want to look at the filing fees. You're going to look at the maintenance of those filing fees on a state-by-state basis, but then also your ability to maintain it. You're going to have a registered agent in that particular state. And so is Illinois sort of your home base and Indiana sort of ancillary? So all of that kind of goes into the decision-making process.
Excellent. That's a lot of good information.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Cari. So all you listeners, make sure you're sticking around for next week's episode. We're going to talk a little bit about how to properly maintain your LLC. If you didn't catch the first episode of this Biz Tip session, we talked about what is an LLC and why you might need it. So Cari, nice work. We'll see you in the next session. For all you followers out there, make sure you're subscribing to the CIBL podcast on whatever your favorite podcast platform is. While you're there, please leave us a quick review. You can also find us on social media, mainly LinkedIn and Facebook. You can connect with Garrett and I there as well. Until next time, y'all been civilized. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Central Illinois Business Leaders Podcast. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/CIBL podcast. You can also follow us on LinkedIn. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. It's the civilized thing to do.